Proud supporters of Africa this week. Engine, with us, you are number one.
For all the talk about infrastructure development in Africa, the reality may be the countries with the greatest infrastructure needs are often the least attractive to investors from the private and public sector. Mohsen Sadat, Associate Director at KPMG, explained what should underpin the concept of infrastructure development in Africa.
In terms of Africa infrastructure, this has been a talking point for several years now. It's a well-known fact that Africa is underspending relative to what the need is. And it seems that there are certain central themes running through that equation. And really the question is how to really increase Africa infrastructure spend. Looking across the continent, there are several challenges. The primary challenges that we see are those of regulation and access to markets or entry into markets, and that is varied from one country to the next.
All right, now what needs to be done? Because we do know that in terms of financing, we have a huge deficit. The World Bank has come on board, the African Development Bank has come on board, the IDC in South Africa is looking at energy efficient programs, but you don't get a sense that a lot of money is flowing into infrastructure programs. Why is that?
It seems that there is definite commitments from the multilateral development banks towards the continent. There are significant projects that have got great potential. The concerns really are how do you untap that, how do you leverage that, and that's where the private sector comes in. So public-private partnerships are definitely what's lacking on the continent, and that is something with changes to legislation or regulation, we can have significant investment in
in a country like Nigeria, where I've been through CNBC, I must admit, it's been quite enlightening, because in Lagos State, you do see a lot of public-private partnerships in building new roads, bridges, and general housing infrastructure. And the private sector will incur the risk initially, manage the project for about 30 years, and then hand it back to the provincial government or municipality. So there are formulae that leaders and authorities are experimenting with in Africa. Why can't we just emulate that in other parts of the continent?
It varies from country to country. Some countries do have the appetite. Several of the African countries are experimenting with PPP models. Some have fairly advanced PPP units set up in their treasury functions, while others are still at fairly early stages. The model does work. It's worked in several of the countries, and the successes are there. The infrastructure's on the ground. People can view those successes.
Just in terms of who incurs the risk, I'll just give you an example. In Johannesburg, residents are up in arms, and I'm one of them, over the proposed tolling of highways in order to really pursue a better program of road management and expansion programs. The private sector partners feel that higher tolls is the only way to recover their investment. The burden on the consumer is that we're just paying a lot more for services, and it creates inflationary risks. How do we find a balance?
I think that that concern spreads across the continent, and it's the issue of subsidization. It's the issue of how do you pay for services, how do you pay for infrastructure, who puts in that equity? Is it the state? Is it the private sector? We see that in the power sector as well, where vast parts of Africa have subsidy structures which are unsustainable. So it does not apply just to toll roads, it applies across the spectrum. And it's imperative that we find the right balance to ensure that we maintain a stable economy while at the same time pricing products accordingly.
Since the 1990s, the transport sector's policies have been modified to accommodate market-determined decisions, enterprise autonomy and private participation in the ownership and management of transport business. Charles Brewer, newly appointed Managing Director for Sub-Saharan Africa at DHL Express.
Africa is a growing economy, and we've been here for 36 plus years, and yes, we're doing very well. That said, you know, there's always opportunity to do an awful lot better, and to your point around infrastructure, look, it's probably a little bit unfair to suggest the infrastructure across Sub-Saharan Africa is difficult in every single country, because I think it varies greatly whether you look at West Africa, East Africa, North or South. But clearly there's opportunity for improvement, and we work at DHL, we work very hard with the local authorities to do just that. And in fact, only today, one of my managers was with the Minister of Customs in Zambia talking about exactly how we can improve their import and export process. I suppose the big thing that's changed over the last 30 odd years is where it used to be very much DHL driving that change. Now the authorities and the regulatory bodies are coming to us and asking us how we can help them become best in class.
How do you overcome the infrastructure challenges? Because you may capitalize on the weakness, but you definitely must be impacted by them. I'm talking about road networks, airport facilities, rail.
Yeah, it is difficult. It's not a mature economy, so we definitely have our challenges. But a couple of things really. One, you know, 42 years ago or so, when we first started the express industry, we worked very hard to develop the international express industry, and today that's the same. So we work very hard with the local authorities to ensure that we help them develop best-in-class processes and systems, and at the same time we have established a very strong foundation in Sub-Saharan Africa. So I think it's different for different logistics companies, but for DHL we have a pretty good platform through 17 dedicated DHL aircraft, 5 world-class facilities. We have a good platform in order to circumnavigate the difficulties of a developing economy.
Rising oil prices impacted significantly on the airline industry in particular, and you know, many of them didn't have very sound hedging strategies. Certainly 18 months ago that was the case. In terms of how you operate, because the express component relies extensively on air. When you deal with volatile oil prices, rising fuel prices, how does that impact your bottom line but your operations?
Well, rightly or wrongly, for us the fuel surcharge or the increasing fuel is just passed on directly to our customers. So it's a left pocket, right pocket movement. We don't obviously lose or make on the fuel pricing. I think the bigger impact is actually on the economy, or the markets that we work in. So you tend to get 3 types of customers that react differently depending on how the fuel moves. So you get one group of customers who don't do anything different. They carry on shipping and managing their supply chain in the same way as they were when prices were lower. You get a second bucket of customers that look for different modes of transportation. So rather than necessarily sending an express, moving it to a freight environment. And then the third customer ships less. And that's probably the one that's most concerning. And again, we work very, very closely with our customers to try and find alternate solutions to how they may ship. And again, through DHL, we have that ability to be able to offer all modes of transportation, so we can, through supply chain dialogue, move customers' shipments from express to a deferred mode if need be.
South Africa's Industrial Development Corporation, or IDC for short, has identified rural nodes and non-accommodation subsectors as strategic areas to facilitate job creation and grow the tourism sector.
The contribution to GDP is still the same, and the Minister of Tourism last week announced very ambitious targets for this to grow even more, together with job creation targets, and to double the number of foreign visitors to the country by 2020. So it's still a very vibrant and exciting sector.
Right, but the sector has gone through a few of its own challenges, obviously precipitated by the global credit crisis, rising fuel prices, and so many international visitors not really flocking into South African shores as had been expected. What's the recovery process been like?
Yeah, I think currently the industry is in a bit of a distressed situation, especially towards the build-up to 2010. A lot of additional capacity in terms of rooms have been added, especially in the established nodes such as Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, and many of those businesses are looking at consolidating rather than expanding at this stage. But we do believe in the longer term the visitors will come back, and therefore we've also adopted this strategy to focus on the underdeveloped nodes and also focus on non-accommodation areas of tourism to attract those visitors.
Those underdeveloped nodes are rural areas. What's envisaged by way of a strategy to penetrate the rural economy and create some sort of a tourism industry there?
It basically goes hand in hand with focusing more on non-accommodation sectors, such as adventure and sports tourism, arts and crafts, backpackers, medical tourism. There's a number of niche tourism activities. Our natural and heritage attractions in different areas. And if those can be developed, we also provide a more balanced package for a visitor who wants to come and visit, and it's not just limited to certain specific attractions.
The IDC is injecting about 250 million rands towards some of these tourism projects, obviously in line with the government's new growth path to create labour-intensive industries and to create jobs by the year 2020. Tangibly, how are you going about it? Yes, you've told us about sort of adventure, niche, off-road, offbeat type projects, but what would be a priority for the IDC? Because within it you've got to consider the growth aspects and the job aspects.
Yes, I think we're trying to look at it at a more integrated approach, obviously identifying specific projects and specific subsectors that we can develop. We are looking at a beach resort in KZN. We're looking at Northern Cape extreme sport attraction together with the Northern Cape government, and there's a number of other activities or a number of other areas where we're also looking at attractions that we can develop. But if we look at, for instance, the KZN beach tourism resort, just the way we would go about it is not only will it benefit the local community in that it will be based on community land, so they will benefit from the lease of the land, but there will also be job creation, which will be specifically primarily given to the local community, and also additional businesses opportunities that may come out of such a development.
Well, that's all for this edition of Africa This Week. Join us again next week for another roundup of the top stories in Africa.